Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Coach's Quarters and welcome to the regular season. I apologize for not being able to get a show out prior to week one so that I could recap all of the games that were coming in week one, but we were treated to quite the slate. Today, I'm going to do a really quick post cap on week one since I am a little late to filming this and you're not really going to get any of this information until right before the games on Sunday. This show should drop on Saturday. But we're going to do a quick recap on what happened in week one, and then we are going to shoot into projections for week two. I will not be covering the Thursday night game that is airing tonight. Tonight is Thursday night. So instead, I'm going to do a post cap on this Thursday. It'll be included there. Just know that it could be a good game. It could be a bad game. That Eagles defensive front looked fantastic in week one. So I do think that they're going to give Minnesota a bit of a trouble, seeing as how Minnesota was beat by the Buccaneers front seven. There really was no excuse for what the Vikings did in week one against Tampa Bay, because not everybody, but a lot of people really thought that the Vikings were going to take that game. Nobody really knew what Baker was going to do against ones, and it turns out the Buccaneers played really well. Baker did come out and make a little jab at the Houston Astros, whom I am a fan of, stating that he was able to read the hand signals that the Vikings were running with, and that's why he was able to do what he was able to do. But I think that the Eagles take this Thursday game. We'll see. It'll be we'll see, right? I could be very wrong. But again, I will hit post cap on that. I won't touch on Thursday night too much tonight. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump right on in to what happened in week one. So I have these games broken up into three different tiers, right? Bad games, medium games, and good games. And there's an asterisk next to a couple of them because they were bad games, but the score was tight. And it was more of we got to see the development of the team and what the team was able to put together versus what they had last year. But still, the score was close, even if it was two really, really bad teams going up against one another. And make no mistake, it does look like there's going to be a bottom tier of teams this year. It really seemed like there was going to be more parity going into the regular season because the preseason is a filthy liar. But just like it does every year, the preseason really doesn't mean anything outside of slotting players that are on the fringe into the 53-man roster or practice squads. So we're going to see, or what we did see was that there were a lot of teams that really showed out in the preseason because their depth was motivated, right? Like you have a lot of twos and threes that came out and they played really, really well. They made the teams look a lot better than they were. And then when you pit the ones against the ones of another team, they absolutely fell flat, right? So we're going to go ahead and kick it off with the bad teams from week one. And the first game that I actually have listed on here is the Browns v. the Bengals. And that's because the Browns beat the dog shit out of the Bengals. And that it wasn't to not be expected, right? I kind of expected the Browns to win this game just because Joey B was hurt all preseason. They rushed him back into week one. They didn't really give him an opportunity to work back into it with the team. So the chemistry was off, the timing was off, and they never really stood a chance. Cleveland hit the gas and then never let off. So one of the things that defines all the games on my bad list, right? So we have the Browns v. the Bengals, San Francisco v. Pittsburgh, Green Bay versus Chicago, Dallas versus the Giants, and the Rams versus the Seahawks. The one thing that really tied all of them together was poor offensive line play. So Cincinnati's offensive line didn't really play that well for Joey B. He missed a couple of throws, but in reality, the offensive line didn't really give him an opportunity to play because, again, the Browns were relentless. The Browns showed up for week one. Cincinnati did not. This was going to be, after the first quarter, this game was all Browns. That Cleveland had the number, Cleveland wanted it more, and Cleveland won the game. Coming out of that, we also saw a lot of speculation about T. Higgins leaving the Bengals, which I think is ultimately going to hurt the Bengals. And I'm going to touch on quarterback contracts in a little bit, but it really feels like the teams that really broke their quarterbacks off are hurting in a couple of other places because go figure, when you pay one person a quarter, a fifth, a sixth of your overall cap, you're going to have deficiency somewhere else. So we saw a lot of speculation about T. Higgins leaving the Bengals because he's in a contract year and the Bengals can't afford to re-up him, especially with Jamar Chase's contract coming up. So with that being said, T. Higgins, please come to Houston. It would be dope to have T. Higgins in a Texans uniform. But anyways, moving forward. So the Browns looked really good. Deshaun Watson looked like he was coming back to the level that he once played at Clemson. He looked a lot better than he did last year, although he didn't look very good. And a little nugget of information, CJ Stroud was ranked above Deshaun Watson in the power rankings for quarterbacks after week 1, which is elite, right? Props to CJ Stroud, whom we'll talk about here in a bit. But Browns looked really, really good against the Bengals in a really, really, really sloppy week 1 for virtually the entire NFL, sans like 3 or 4 teams. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward what the Browns will be able to do. The Browns actually play the Steelers this week, whom is the second team that I'm going to talk about today. The San Francisco 49ers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was a 30-7 drumming by San Francisco. That score's a whole lot closer than the game actually was. I had a bad beat in my preseason show about the Pittsburgh Steelers, where I really talked up their defense, who, flamed me on fantasy football. And I really talked up how good their offense looked in the preseason, despite knowing that the preseason isn't really indicative of how the actual regular season is going to go. But Pittsburgh looked lost, man. They looked really, really bad. Kenny Pickett didn't know what to do. The offensive line was atrocious, which we did hit on in the preseason show. That was a big question mark, and it turns out that was it was very problematic for Pitt. They just couldn't get out of their own way. There was no running game to speak of. Kenny Pickett couldn't hit the broadside of the broadside of a barn. He had a couple of plays in there, a dozen or so plays where he had decent protection. He still wasn't able to do something with the ball. And then the rest of it, his offensive line let him down. And it's just, there was nothing he could do, man. We saw Cam Hayward go onto the injured reserve after that game. That sucks for Pittsburgh. Their defensive line is going to take a pretty big hit. But overall, we didn't see a whole lot. Alex Highsmith didn't play as well as anybody expected him to. TJ Watt played well, but it doesn't matter when you have one edge rusher that's playing well and the rest of your team's not doing anything, right? So this poor offensive line play, I would say, is what really hurt Pittsburgh here. But also, it's because the 49ers defense looked just outrageous. ESPN had touted them as potentially, the greatest defensive line in the NFL, which I have to fervently disagree with after the Dallas and New York Giants game, despite me being the largest Dallas hater on the face of the planet. I don't know if you could say San Francisco's front seven is the best in the league after week 1, especially since we're only 1 week in and, any given Sunday, right? But San Francisco looked fantastic against Pittsburgh. Brock Purdy was absolutely slinging it. Myself included, I didn't know if Brock Purdy was going to be able to bounce back. He was Mr. Irrelevant last year, and we got a pretty large sample size of what he was truly capable of. But coming back the second year, people have film on him, and people are able to prepare for him. So I didn't really know what to expect from Brock Purdy, especially coming off the injury that he had. But he looked fantastic. He's an above average game manager, and I don't mean that as an insult by any means. He is the perfect quarterback for Kyle Shanahan's offensive system. And there's just no way around that. Like, it's no wonder they were able to cut bait on Trey Lance the way they did, because Brock Purdy looked fantastic. And then you mix in the run game. CMC is just a stud. It's so nice seeing CMC, Christian McCaffrey, look like he enjoys playing football again. In year 2 with the 49ers, he looks like he's having fun, which, spells doom for the rest of the NFL, seeing as how he was at the top of the NFL for so many years in Carolina. But the 49ers beat Pittsburgh by 23 points, but it should have been 40, right? Like, they looked just as good as, or almost just as good as Dallas did. Props to Mike Tomlin for getting points on the board, and I look forward to seeing what Mike Tomlin kind of does with this offense moving forward, because, again, Pittsburgh had no answers. They couldn't do anything on defense. The 49ers had too many weapons, and quite frankly, the 49ers don't have the best team of weapons in the league. So it doesn't look good for Pittsburgh. It looks like they might actually end up taking the cellar in that division, which, worse things could happen. But It sucks because you've already started to hear calls for Mike Tomlin's head, and in my humble opinion, I think Mike Tomlin's one of the top 5 or 6 coaches in the NFL, regardless of what they're doing right now, regardless of how bad their quarterback play is, regardless of how bad their defense looked in Week 1. Mike Tomlin is very good at what he does. So the fact that the Pittsburgh fans were able to turn on him so quick after Week 1 of this season is a bit baffling. But moving forward, Green Bay versus Chicago is the next team that I have on this. And bad is not how I would explain what Green Bay did. I avoided a lot of the Green Bay stars, namely Aaron Jones and Jordan Love in fantasy this year because they were relative unknowns. I haven't liked what I've seen out of Jordan Love in prior playtime. But Jesus, Green Bay looks like they have another quarterback, right? Like you go from Favre to Rodgers, then Rodgers to Love, and it's like you don't even miss a beat. It looked like a younger Aaron Rodgers out there playing for Green Bay. But on the flip side of the coin, right, I expected Justin Fields to come out and play at almost an MVP caliber level starting in Week 1. I was all on board the Chicago hype train, and this was one of my worst beats of Week 1 because Chicago looked terrible. They can't throw the ball. Whenever the offensive line does actually block for Justin Fields, he misses the freaking pass. You know, Chicago went out and got DJ Moore and they got Mapletron and Chase Claypool. And it just felt like they couldn't get anything going. Chase Claypool's potentially on the trade block right now due to lack of effort. They lost Deontay Johnson to a hamstring injury. And DJ Moore looked frustrated the entire game because Justin Fields just couldn't hit him with the ball. Not to mention the run game lacked unless Justin Fields was taking the ball, which he had to do 100 times because the freaking offensive line couldn't block. Again, I'm going to beat that dead horse into the ground today. But it was a very disappointing start to the season for Chicago. It was a great start to the season for Green Bay, silencing all the haters, myself included. Right, their wide receivers showed up and looked like they were having fun, and it looks like everybody's really gelling around Jordan Love, which you love to see if you're a Green Bay fan or if you hate the Chicago Bears. That is what you wanted to see there. Aaron Jones looked really, really good, had, I think, 2 touchdowns. They look like they are potentially going to give Detroit a run for their money for tops of that division again, which I hate because I really wanted Motor City Dan Campbell to be there, but you know, if Aaron Rodgers leaves and Jordan Love comes in and he plays better than what Rodgers did when Rodgers was still there, you know, that spells great things for Green Bay. So the only caveat to this is Jordan Love's going to play so well that he's going to have to get broke off by Green Bay after this season because he signed that wonky 1-year deal instead of taking the 5th-year option. So it'll be interesting to see what Green Bay does because Jordan Love, if he balls out all season like he did Week 1 against Chicago, you're looking at a potential cap problem, because he's going to command a lot of money. And with the way that, despite the cap room increasing every year, you're looking at him taking a massive chunk out of what they have left in their cap. So it'll be interesting to see what Green Bay does. But that is, conversations for way, way, way later down the road. It is still just Week 1 just concluded. We're just now going into Week 2. So we've got a lot of football to really enjoy and appreciate prior to worrying about the financial situation that some of these teams are going to be in. The next game on the list for the bad games, Dallas and the New York Giants. I hate the Dallas Cowboys, man. I hate everything about the Dallas Cowboys. I was a Tony Romo fan. I like Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. There are so many players on the team that I like, but I hate the Dallas Cowboys. Everything about them. I just hate the Dallas Cowboys, but God bless did they just thump the Giants. Now, admittedly, this is the biggest example that I have for poor offensive line play, right? Like, they broke Danny Dimes off. Daniel Jones got a massive contract this offseason that nobody agreed with. And they did virtually nothing for their offensive line. And, from the first snap on, the Giants were just getting their dick smashed into the dirt, right? They stood no chance. Dallas outclassed them in all 3 levels of the game, the entire game. It was pouring down rain, and it only seemed to affect the Giants. This was a terrible game. Out of all the games this week, this was the only one that was truly terrible, and the score isn't even as close as it should have, or the score isn't as bad as it should have been. Dallas probably could have scored 60 points, man. It didn't matter. Dak didn't have a great game, which is an interesting caveat to going into Week 2 because their passing game was not clicking. Tony Pollard is a beast, right? The Pollard show is here. Zeke's out, and Tony Pollard did exactly what you would want from him to stepping into that role. Deuce Vaughn is a tiny man, but Deuce Vaughn looked great. Somehow, I didn't think Deuce Vaughn would do that well in the NFL, but against the Giants defense, that dude might as well be LaDainian Tomlinson, right? Like, the Giants couldn't stop the run game. Whenever CeeDee Lamb had the ball in his hands or Michael Gallup caught a pass, it just felt like the Giants didn't have an answer for him. And you have to question whether or not the $47 million a year, whatever it is Danny Dimes is getting right now, if that was worth it, because you could have taken an average quarterback and beefed up the offensive line, beefed up the secondary, or beefed up the defensive line, or just done other things. And you have to wonder if that would have done better for the Giants than signing Danny Dimes to that massive contract and then watching him get hit on every single snap, because he was running on all the plays that he was even able to get the ball out of his hands. He had 3 people in his face. It didn't matter what the Giants did. It didn't matter any audibles that they called. It didn't matter if they were running screens to try and get the defensive pressure off of Dimes. It just didn't matter because Dallas was freaking everywhere. As of right now, you would have to put Dallas's defense in as the best in the NFL because that is what they are after week one. One, it was the only shutout, but two, it was just utter dominance. And I can't stroke Dallas's ego any more than I am right now, and I hope I don't have to do this again this year. But I mean, God bless. It looked like a high school team versus the Dallas Cowboys, and I really hope that the Giants are able to turn this around because, I really like Brian Daboll. I think he is a terrific coach. I think he was the only reason that Josh Allen was actually any good, which I'll touch on here in a bit when I talk about the Bills game. But that game was nuts. I kept hoping that the Giants were going to do something, and turns out they just couldn't. So the Giants look bad. I would not put my money on the Giants to win any games until they give us any sort of reason to believe that it'll be possible for them to do something. So yeah, I mean that's my take on that game. Dallas looked fantastic. The Giants looked like dog water all game. The final game that I have under the bad list, we're looking at the Los Angeles Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks. And, after the game, Geno Smith came out and they quoted him saying that the Rams just wanted it more. And truthfully, that's what it looked like all game. Another bad beat by me. I didn't think that Seattle was going to lose this game. The Los Angeles Rams they're not the youngest team in the world. The chemistry may not be there. Cooper Kupp is hurt. Their defense is good, but they're aged. And it didn't matter. The Rams looked like they did the year they won the Super Bowl. So that was a cool game in terms of seeing the Rams do what they could potentially do, because it looks like the Rams aren't quite out of it. And, the big conversation around the Rams is they loaded their team up with talent, with veteran talent, and they rode that all the way to the Super Bowl, got the dub, and now they're in a rebuild mode. But it looks like if they're able to put more complete games like they did in week one together, it looks like more of a soft rebuild versus a hard rebuild. And when Cooper Kupp comes back from injury, he is on IR, so he's going to miss the first 4. But when Cooper comes back, it looks like their offense might actually be semi-lethal. Matt Stafford was slinging it, which was great to see. I've been a huge Matty Stafford fan since he was in Detroit, year one in Detroit. So that was promising to see. But on the flip side of the coin, Seattle looked bad. And hear Geno come out and say that, the Rams just wanted it more in a division matchup in week 1 of the NFL. You have to question what's going on in Seattle. And hopefully they're not going to flounder, right? Like, hopefully Seattle's able to put it together. I would really love to see Seattle make a run. I really like Geno Smith in that offense, despite how bad they looked in week 1. I really would like to see Seattle make a run. In the NFC, you have a couple of big dogs, but there's still wiggle room there for wild card and the lower tiers into the playoffs. So, Seattle could pretty easily claim one of those spots if they're able to get out of their own head and put together a more complete game than what they did in week 1. Geno Smith only had 112 yards through the air, which, again, the Rams defense played lights out. So holding Geno Smith to a touchdown and 112 yards on 26 pass attempts, props to them. But Geno can do more, and he proved that last year. And this offense has so many weapons. Tyler Lockett disappeared. Jackson Smith and Jigba didn't do anything. You had DK Metcalf, who had 47 yards and a touchdown, which is a very average stat line to say the least. They had no run game. Kenneth Walker, admittedly, he did okay, right? 12 carries, 64 yards. The average is good, but the yards aren't there, and he wasn't able to score a touchdown. Zach Charbonnet was a bit of a disappointment in week 1. Their second best receiver was Will Dissly, the tight end, with 2 catches for 17 yards, and you're just never going to win games like that. Whereas on the flip side, Matt Stafford threw for over 300. It didn't matter that he didn't throw a touchdown because for the first time in years, the Rams' run game carried their offense. But Stafford had 334 yards. That's 3 times the amount that Geno was able to put together. So that by itself, the Rams were stretching the field in ways that Seattle couldn't. You had Kyron Williams come in and score 2 touchdowns despite having a 3.5 yard a carry average. And then you had a couple of receivers that I don't think anybody expected to step up. At least I didn't. I really thought that Van Jefferson was going to be the focal point of this offense. And it turns out he isn't or wasn't. You had a Puka Nakua. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but you have Puka, and then you had Tutu Atwell, who I liked last year. I do think Tutu Atwell's a really good receiver, but they combined for 16 receptions for 138 yards, or 238 yards, and that's phenomenal, right? For what would be not necessarily backup wide receivers, but backup wide receivers come in, take Cooper Kupp's role, and torch the Seahawks. It says something for them, right? But with that being said, yeah, I would just really like to see more from Seattle. I can't wait to see them play. I'm really looking forward to Seattle's Week 2 matchup against the Lions. The Lions beat the Kansas City Chiefs, which we'll talk about here shortly. But also, it'll give the Seahawks a chance to, maybe they got the Week 1 jitters out. Maybe there were some issues going on at practice. So going into Week 2, we might get to see a totally different team, which I'm hoping for. But with that being said, that was everybody that I had on my bad slate of games. And admittedly, not everybody's going to agree with how I have these games slotted because the scores are a little bit wonky. But you could arguably put the first game that I have on my mid tier on the bad tier. However, as a homer, I would have to fervently disagree with you. I have Houston versus Baltimore on my mid round of games, and the only reason that I have Houston v. Baltimore on the mid round is because the Texans held Baltimore to 25 points. No matter how few points we scored on offense, which is 0 because our special team scored all of our points, no matter how poor we looked on offense, our defense looks amazing, right? And it's not our skill players' fault. CJ Stroud graded higher than any other rookie quarterback and Deshaun Watson in the PFF power rankings for quarterbacks. And our offense didn't look bad if our offensive line could block, right? You had a couple of penalty problems out of Laramie Tunsil, which has plagued him virtually his entire career. We're on our 3rd string center. We're starting a backup right tackle while Titus Howard is on injured reserve. And we're missing Kenyon Green, our interior lineman, that guard. So we acquired a couple of people. We got that right tackle from the Arizona Cardinals, and we picked up a guard to replace Kenyon Green, but our offensive line is a problem. No matter how you spin it, the Texans' offensive line is a massive problem. However, despite not having a run game, because Dameon Pierce nor Devin Singletary showed up, despite that, we didn't look that bad. And a 25-9 beatdown by the Ravens is nowhere near as bad as that could or probably should have been. And that's why I slid these guys into the mid tier. I mean, check out these head-to-head stats, right? CJ Stroud had a better game than Lamar Jackson. Stroud went 28 for 44 for 242 yards. LJ went 17 to 22 for $169 and a pick. We didn't have much of a run game, but it was just about as good as Baltimore's. Dameon Pierce had 11 for 38. Lamar Jackson was the leading rusher for Baltimore with 6 for 38. Nico Collins was a very pleasant bright spot of the game. It looks like Stroud and Nico have chemistry already, which is fantastic, and that bodes well for everybody. Nico's nearing a contract year. We're in year 3 of Nico Collins. He's been oft injured. And it was very, very nice seeing Stroud connect with him so many times. He almost went over the century mark, right? So it gives you something to really hope for. The Texans looked better in this loss than they looked in any loss last year. And that's the takeaway from this game. That's why I moved them into the mid slot. Despite losing by, 15 points? No, 16 points. Despite losing by 16 points to the Ravens, Houston had almost nothing but positives. Titus Howard comes back off of IR after week 4. That's going to be a huge help. Maybe we'll get a little bit more help at center and left guard. Like, if our offensive line can figure this out, the Texans could be decent. They could win more games than what some people are expecting them to. And that's awesome. And again, I can't hammer away enough at how good the Texans defense was against Baltimore, right? Denzel Perryman looks like he was a great pickup. He ended up getting a little banged up, but he's already practicing in full again. So it's looking, barring a setback, he's going to be back. Tavierre Thomas graded out as the number 1 corner in the NFL after week 1. That's amazing, right? Not very often we get that. Will Anderson had the first sack recorded by a rookie in franchise history. That's fantastic, and he was a maniac. The dude is close to every tackle of the game, and you love to see it. Jonathan Grenard showed out, right? Another sack. And it just looks like, maybe we can put something together. We did lose Petrie. And I am not a big fan of Eric Murray. I've been very vocal against Eric Murray still being on the roster, and the contract that we gave him a couple years back was questionable at best. But I mean, our defense looks good, and they can only get better with time together and the ability to grow as an actual unit. So there's a lot of optimism, at least on my end of this. Like, despite the loss, it really looks like Houston's going to have a promising season. And there's nothing more that we can ask from first-year head coach DeMeco Ryans, right? Like, what a debut. Again, we only scored 9 points. We lost by 16, but what a promising debut by our brand new coach, right? Moving into the second game, I have Carolina v. Atlanta. This is one of those asterisk games, right? Because both teams played really, really bad. Bryce Young's debut game was not great. There were some really positive takeaways, though. Miles Sanders looked good as the RB1 in Carolina. Me personally, I wanted to see more Chuba Hubbard. I did like Chuba Hubbard in college, but I mean, they traded for Miles Sanders, or they acquired Miles Sanders, and Miles Sanders looked good. I mean, he was the brightest point on that offense all night. Hayden Hurst looked really good, although Bryce Young peppered Hayden Hurst with targets, and you can't just rely on your tight ends, right? Unfortunately, in order to acquire Bryce Young, Carolina had to trade DJ Moore to Chicago. And without that wide receiver 1, Carolina is a little bit lacking. They have a lot of young potential at wide receiver, but it's going to take a little while for that to flourish into anything remarkable, right? So, as expected, their passing game wasn't great, but they don't have great players on their offense yet. I mean, it's not to say that these guys aren't talented, but there's just not enough there. They don't know the speed of the game well enough, and quite frankly, Atlanta didn't look bad. So when you have all these new pieces in Carolina, it's really hard to have expected them to do more than they did, because they didn't necessarily have a bad game. They didn't have a great game. Chuba Hubbard was more explosive than Miles Sanders, but it does look like Miles Sanders is going to be the lead back, and Chuba has been a great change of pace back up to this point. So you can't fix what's not broken, and their run game is working, and who knows, Chuba might not be able to hold up throughout an entire game. They know more than we do, so it is what it is. Bryce Young looked decent using his legs. He had 3 for 17, which could have been worse. He did have 20 completions on 38 attempts. He only threw for 146 yards. He had 2 picks and a touchdown. But it's one of these things where their top 2 receivers were Hayden Hurst, their tight end, who was number 1 with 5 for 41 and a tutter. And then you had Miles Sanders with 4 catches for 26. And then it was an immediate drop off because you have young receivers in Terrace Marshall Jr. and Jonathan Mingo, who they need time, right? Like, you can't just step right into this offense. I know Terrace Marshall Jr. was here last year, but it's a totally different offense, right? Bryce Young is a brand new quarterback. So they produced about what you should have expected them to produce. The one caveat to that, or two, I guess, I liked Laviska Shenault in Jacksonville, and Adam Thielen is basically a Minnesota legend at this point, and they were relatively non-participants in this game. They each had 2 catches. They both had less than 20 receiving yards. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to grow with Bryce Young, because both of them are the wily veterans on this offense, right? So you expect them to take on more of that leadership role and to really lead the pack here. I like Hayden Hurst, but it's going to be one of those things where if you're relying on your tight end and your running back so much throughout the season, there's just no way that you're going to have a very impactful year in terms of the actual, like, the grand scheme of things, right? You're not going to make the playoffs if your best receivers at the end of the year are a running back and a tight end. That's just the way it goes. Their defense looked good. I love Carolina's defense. I kind of hate that their offense is in this rebuild mode, this soft rebuild now, or it is in a rebuilding mode, right? Because the defense does seem to have some real studs on it. You know, Derek Brown's a dog. Brian Burns is a dog. Shaq Thompson is very good. Jeremy Chin is a dog. They got CJ Henderson from Jacksonville, who could have played better. It's just, all in all, Carolina played about as well as they should have, and they did not play very well. So take that how you will. That is a team that will develop as the season goes on. They're not going to win a ton of games this year. Again, rebuild. But they do have the potential to upset a couple of people and maybe peel off a couple of wins that they don't deserve, right? I do not think that they have the number 1 pick in the draft. On the flip side of the card, Atlanta played pretty well. Desmond Ridder did not do anything, and not to take away from his game because he completed almost all of his passes, but 15 of 18 for 115 and a touchdown. Again, that's not necessarily a stat line that's going to win you games against teams that aren't led by a rookie quarterback, right? You have Tyler Algier, who outpaced every other running back, which made no sense. I thought he was going to be RB3 coming into the season. Turns out, fringe RB2. He might be RB1 until Bijan kind of settles in. I doubt it. I think Bijan's going to end up being really, really good. But Algier had 5 more carries than he did and almost 25 more yards plus 2 more touchdowns. So the run game makes no sense in Atlanta, but it worked against the Carolina defensive front. Just like Carolina, the number 1 receiver was a tight end, although Kyle Pitts is not your prototypical tight end. And he did only have 2 receptions. But this team was led by a defense that has really not been the best part of this team for a couple of years now. But go figure, they grabbed Jesse Bates, who the Bengals let go because they couldn't afford to pay him because they had to break Joe Burrow off. Jesse Bates showed out, 5 tackles, 2 picks. I mean, you couldn't ask any more from him, and it looks like he's really going to bring another edge to the Falcons defense, and that's awesome. That's great for them because the Falcons defense has been what's lacked the last couple of years, back since the Matty Ice days. So it's nice to see the Falcons actually address a problem and the solution work out. Right. Moving forward, Jacksonville versus Indianapolis. This game could have been slotted into the more better games, you know, the mo better, because Indianapolis's rookie quarterback looked pretty good, although he did get hurt. Jacksonville, I think, is going to win this division this year. There's no reason for them not to. Trevor Lawrence looked really good. Calvin Ridley is going to be unstoppable in the AFC South. He's already cemented himself as wide receiver 1 there, and he's taken a lot of flack off of the other players on that offensive back. Travis Etienne did not look bad. Like the Jacksonville Jaguars, a well-oiled machine they may not be after week 1, but they're a well-oiled machine, right? You have a lot of people carrying over from last season, and it just looks like they're going to really be able to put something together this year. You know, they brought in a couple of people in the offseason to really bolster what they were able to do, and probably their biggest addition, in my opinion, on their offense is going to be a guy by the name of Zay Jones, who they got out of Las Vegas. I didn't really understand why Las Vegas let him go, but he came in, sat right behind Calvin Ridley on the depth chart, and he killed it week 1. And you can't really ask any more of him. It does suck that Christian Kirk didn't do anything. He had 1 catch for 9 yards, and he's getting paid like a mug. But you love to see Calvin Ridley come back after the bogus gambling suspension. And I love an underdog story, and Zay Jones is exactly that. He's never been that big top guy. And I mean, he looked great for Jacksonville, albeit he only had 55 yards, but he didn't need any more. He was absolutely torching the Indianapolis defense, which, you know, on the other side of things, the defense for Indianapolis did not look that great, but it could have been worse. And talking about Jacksonville, you have Alukun, I believe is how you pronounce it, the middle linebacker. He looked really, really good in the debut. Their pass rush looked better than they have in a long time. Josh Allen had 3 sacks, which bodes really well for that defense. And it looks like you have a lot of people really clicking. Trayvon Walker ended up with a sack in the first game, and having 4 sacks between your 2 big pass rushers, that's great, right? What a start to the season. On the flip side of this, Indianapolis, it's not that they struggled on offense, but they didn't play a great offense, and that's got a lot to do with the fact that they don't have a running back, right? Jonathan Taylor's still out. You have so many injuries. Evan Hull got hurt, and then you have the Deion Jackson cat. He had 13 carries for 14 yards. You're not going to do much with that. AR had to do everything. Anthony Richardson, the rookie quarterback, had to do everything. He had 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown, which is fantastic, but he also got hurt at the end of the game. So you have to ask yourself, what really are they going to gain from Anthony Richardson having to shoulder this entire offense as a mobile quarterback? Because that's what happens. You make your quarterback play out of position, and he's going to get hurt. Any quarterback in the league, you can name one. All the ones that have been mobile in any way, shape, or form eventually take enough hits to get hurt. So you have to wonder what Indianapolis is really doing with this whole debacle, because the run game is a problem. The run game is a massive problem. Michael Pittman looked good. I'll give him that. 8 catches for 97 and a tutter. Michael Pittman looked great slotting into that wide receiver 1 role. But then on the flip side of that, where's Alec Pierce? Everybody expected Alec Pierce to be a fringe wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in this offense, and he had 1 catch for 5 yards. So you can't have an offense that's based around these players that disappear against teams like Jacksonville. And I know I just said that I expect Jacksonville to be good, but you can't have your best players disappear on week 1, right? You can't have your best players disappear against a division rival, right? That doesn't bode well for the rest of the season. So I'm pretty down bad on Indianapolis. I don't really know if there's a way for them to come back from this year. It just feels like they dug themselves into too big of a hole to really compete. We'll see how the year plays on, but just judging by week 1, I don't know what Indianapolis is going to actually be able to do against the better teams. Jacksonville may be good, but are they the 49ers? Hell no. Are they the Dallas Cowboys? Definitely not. So you have to ask, what are they really going to be able to accomplish, right? Their defense did okay, and by okay, I mean they had a couple of real big players. Isaiah Franklin played great at middle linebacker. He's on my fantasy team. Shout out to him. That dude scored me a lot of points. But beyond that, DeForest Buckner had a good game. That dude's a dog. But behind, there's so many names on this defense that just didn't necessarily show up. And we had tackling problems by Indianapolis. It felt like the Jaguars players were just breaking tackles all over the place. So moving into week 2, it's going to be interesting to see what the Colts game plan around to try and open their potential up, I guess would be the best way to put this. So moving forward to the good games, right? Detroit versus Kansas City. A lot of people said that Kansas City lost this game. Both sides were missing big players. Travis Kelce and Chris Jones were in the game for Kansas City. But the Lions were missing players as well. And although Kadarius Toney had 3 drops that did ultimately change the outcome of the game a little bit, the Detroit secondary was everywhere. There were so many forced incompletions that, quite frankly, you can't pin that loss on Kadarius Toney because they had so many other snaps outside of what he dropped, right? They couldn't get a run game growing all that great. Detroit just looked good. Detroit looked really good in week 1. Detroit looked like they really prepared for the Kansas City Chiefs. And props to Motor City Dan Campbell. Dan freaking Campbell, man. This might be the year Detroit wins that division. I know that Green Bay looked good, and I know that Green Bay is going to be good. But you know what? It's hard not to cheer for Detroit. It's hard not to cheer for all they are having fun, man. Amon St. Brown is a freaking beast. The Detroit Lions really just look good at all 3 facets of the game. Is there room for improvement? Yes, absolutely. Detroit suffered from drops just like Kansas City did. All right, so their running game looked really good. David Montgomery coming out of Chicago. Dude's had over 1,000 scrimmage yards every year for the last 4 for Chicago. He really carried that offense, and it showed in his debut in Detroit. Naturally, they're going to work Jahmyr Gibbs more into the offense as the season progresses. But there's a division there, right? Monty's between the tackles. He is a power runner. He will drop his head and run right through you. Gibbs is going to be great in the passing game. He's got that really quick step, and he's so fast. His game speed is so much faster than his 40 time, and he didn't have a bad 40 time, right? And then you have their offense, where you have Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who came out. Brown did really well last season. He was a huge breakout player, so we all kind of expected him to be good. But Josh Reynolds looked amazing. Josh Reynolds coming out of the Los Angeles Rams, or wherever it is he came from last year, he looked really good. And then Sam Laporta, who I didn't know who Sam Laporta was before this game, but he looked fantastic. And I can't stroke the Lions too much. Again, I need to get through these games. But the Lions looked really, really good against a Chiefs team that really just looked like they were at a loss for most of the game. You know, Patrick Mahomes threw that pick six. Brian Branch, the rookie safety out of Alabama, was kind of in the right place at the right time. And that was the most Minkah Fitzpatrick interception that anybody not named Minkah Fitzpatrick could get. But no, that's not a slight on him. Like, right place, right time. He was where he needed to be, and he made the play, and then he scored the touchdown. So it's one of those things. Like, the Chiefs just look bad. Quite frankly, the offense looks lost without Travis Kelce. You know, he's their red zone target. He's their field stretcher. Not to mention, it looked like they really missed Tyreek Hill because they have so many young, small, fast receivers, and they couldn't get anything going. And you have to feel for Pat a little bit, not really, but you have to feel for Pat a little bit because it just felt like he was at a loss. Like, Pat was hitting all of his throws. Dude's so good. It doesn't matter, you know, rain, snow, sunny skies. Patrick Mahomes is going to make every throw, but they couldn't do anything with it. It was either A, dropped by the receiver, or B, there was a Lions corner or a Lions safety or a Lions linebacker right there knocking the ball out. So bad showing by Kansas City for week one. Is it indicative of the season? Definitely not. Kansas City's going to be a player just like they have been the last couple of years. But for the Lions, this was a fantastic debut, and I hope it is indicative of what's to come because that division's wide open. There's no more Aaron Rodgers. There's no more dominance from Green Bay until Jordan Love proves that he can do that. So, you know, hell yeah to the Lions, who came in and they played better than the Chiefs. They wanted it more, and they got the dub. They only won by 1 point, but it doesn't matter because good teams find a way to win games. No matter what the score, you don't have to win by 40 points to be a good team, right? Kansas City Chiefs just won the Super Bowl and dropped by 1 to the Lions. So, you know, well done, Detroit. Well done, Motor City, Dan Campbell. Moving on, Tampa Bay versus Minnesota. Baker Mayfield slided the Astros, and, you know, F him for that. But Baker Mayfield played well in his debut for Tampa Bay. He is not Tom Brady, but he did look pretty good. He looked like he's kind of returning to form. It looked like Baker was having fun out there, and it's good for football, right? Baker Mayfield probably shouldn't have been drafted where he was all those years ago, but that is not his fault nor his problem, and it seems like he might be able to find a home with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were buoyed by their defense. I'm not going to dig into the stats of this game. They were buoyed by their defense and the fact that that's about it, actually, because Minnesota's defense kind of and Minnesota's offensive line did not play great. So with Minnesota's offensive line being a question mark, Captain Kirk is arguably the least mobile quarterback in the league. The dude can't run whatsoever. So it makes sense that Tampa Bay's strong front seven showing was able to beat Minnesota. However, I don't believe that by the end of the year, the Buccaneers will be a better team than the Vikings. This is another one of those that I don't believe was indicative of what is to come for the rest of the season. However, Tampa did win 20-17, despite Justin Jets having a great game. Alexander Mattison as RB1 didn't necessarily have the best running game for his debut as the lead back, but he did catch a touchdown. So there's optimism to be had there. It's going to be a telling season for Minnesota because if Minnesota falls flat this year, we're staring a rebuild in the face. They've got some holes, and it looks like they've got some holes. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up going with that. Moving on, Arizona versus the Washington Commanders. Sam Howell is not a very good quarterback yet. Neither is Josh Dobbs. This is my biggest asterisk game, right? I have it listed as one of the good games of the week because the score was close at 20-16 Washington. But this was a bad showing. I feel bad for the Washington fans. I really do, because there are so many good players on that team, but there's just so many other bad players in pivotal positions that cause them to be less than stellar. Arizona's tanking for Caleb Williams that's going to be a fun one because they just paid Kyler Murray. But I do believe they're tanking for Caleb Williams unless they unless they grab Marvin Harrison Jr. with the first pick and then really bolster around Kyler Murray. But it's this was a very sloppy game. This one was a very hard one to watch. If you like bad offense and bad defense and a bunch of players that probably wouldn't start on 20 of the other teams, this was your game. This was like a preseason matchup in the regular season. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here. The NFC East the NFC East looks absolutely stacked. So Washington's probably going to be at the cellar there. Arizona's definitely going to be the worst team in their division. So this game had no sort of impact on what the actual season's going to hold, I don't think. Unless Washington really figures something out or Josh Dobbs becomes the just king of the quarterbacks, which, again, it's not going to happen. It'd be cool. I like Josh Dobbs. I wish him nothing but the best, and I couldn't believe that Arizona held the game as close as they did, but these were two bad teams going at it, and the less bad of the two bad won. So that's really all I've got for that one, man. Next game is going to be Tennessee versus New Orleans. Love to see Derek Carr win in the debut game for New Orleans. It was a sloppy game. There was not a lot to be proud of. You did see Rashid Shaheed score. You saw a lot of the offensive firepower. You saw Mike Thomas come back to the field, which was really cool. I don't know how many of y'all are New Orleans fans. I am not, but I am a Mike Thomas fan, and it was nice to see him come back to the field after his toes kept him out for 18 years or whatever that's been so far. Not really, the better part of the last two. But seeing Mike Thomas come back, and considering that both Damar Hamlin and John Mechie didn't play in week one, Mike Thomas could be a shoe-in for comeback player of the year, which I think a lot of people are kind of discounting right now. So it was nice to see Mike Thomas come back to the field. Ryan Tannehill's days might be numbered in Tennessee. Tennessee looks sloppy for no reason. It's the same team that was there last year. Tennessee just doesn't look very good right now. I don't know. I can't even tell you what they could do to fix it. Their quarterback play is not great. Their defense isn't great. It's just, there's a lot wrong with Tennessee. And as a Houston Texans fan, I hate the Titans. So I'm excited for this downfall of the Titans. But in the name of non-bias, right, you would like to see Tennessee do more with their opportunity. Ryan Tannehill, as long as he has been in the league, had 3 picks on only 198 yards. Derrick Henry really couldn't get anything going. DeAndre Hopkins was decent, but it doesn't matter how good your receiver is if your quarterback can't throw the ball to him. So 7 catches for 65 wasn't enough to save the Titans, which anybody who knows football knew that DeAndre Hopkins going to the Titans wasn't going to turn them into some sort of a juggernaut, right? He makes them better, sure. And I'm sure there's flies in the face of one of my previous takes, but I don't know, man. Tennessee's offense doesn't scare me, especially after watching them come out week one, and they really just looked flat. It was a very unmotivated performance. Whereas the Saints, although only scoring 16 points, again, it was nice seeing Derek Carr on a team that actually appreciates him. He threw for over 300 yards and a touchdown. Had a pick, but over 300 yards and a touchdown. Jamal Williams is getting the ball. I mean, Alvin Kamara is out with a suspension right now, so Jamal Williams will see a small downtick in carries once he comes back. But if you don't like Jamal Williams, you don't like NFL football, right? The dude is awesome. He's the heart. He's got more soul than any other player out there. It's really hard to cheer against Jamal Williams. So it was nice seeing him get 18 carries in week one. And then you have sophomore receiver Chris Olave leading the pack for them, which was awesome. Again, Rashid Shaheed played a really nice game with 5 for 89 and a touchdown. Mike Thomas slowly returning to form with 5 receptions. So it really just, as a cumulative effort, the Saints played like a unified team in week one, and they were able to inch out a win by 1 point. Again, good teams find ways to win regardless of the final outcome. So the fact that the Saints beat the Titans, 1, I don't think the Titans are very good, but 2, if they are good, the Saints were better, right? So that bodes well for a division that's not necessarily the strongest in the NFL. So we could potentially see the Saints rise to the number one in that division this season, which will be fun to watch. Everybody likes playing in the dome, right? The dome's great. So the Saints playing well is a good thing for the NFL. And that, that rhymes, so it's got to be true. Next game up on this slate is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Denver Broncos. I could not be happier that the Denver Broncos lost this game. Russell Wilson kind of returned to form. He looked a lot better in this game, and it really looked like he was going to potentially be able to pull out a dub here. He didn't, and, quite frankly, I'm here for it. I am not a big Sean Payton fan, and after his comments about Nathaniel Hackett, which is an unwritten rule, but a rule all the same, that you don't criticize the coach that came before you and this, that, and the other. So the way that he came out and attacked Nathaniel Hackett, although true, everything he said was true. Hackett was the worst, arguably the worst coach in Denver Broncos history. You don't do that, right? Plus Bountygate and the fact that Sean Payton's only ever won with Drew Brees, and it is what it is, right? He's big dicking around, and it's one of those things where I was glad that the Broncos put them in their place. Whom the Broncos are number one in that division, by the way. They're the only team that won, so props to them. But Jimmy G looked pretty good. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a more efficient game, sans the pick. Josh Jacobs looked bad, but what more can you expect from somebody that missed the entire preseason courtesy of a contract battle? Jacoby Myers looked really good. The Patriots made a mistake not paying Myers, in my opinion. He was their best receiver last year, and it showed this week when Jacoby was an absolute stud for the Raiders. I'm hoping for him to have a speedy recovery. He did actually suffer a concussion in that game, so it'll be interesting to see him come back because he looked amazing. And, when you play second fiddle to Davante Adams and you outpace Davante by quite a bit, that's a great thing because Davante Adams may be the pound-for-pound best wide receiver in the league, right? On the flip side, the Broncos are beat up. Their wide receiver core is non-existent, right? Everybody's hurt just about. And again, Russell Wilson played well. Russell Wilson played better this game than he arguably did any game last season, but it didn't matter, right? No run game. Javonte Williams is still coming back off that injury, and they never really got going, right? Their best receiver was Samjay Pirine. He plays running back. He's been in the league for quite a few years. So when you have Samjay Pirine catching the ball 4 times for 37 yards and that's leading your team, that isn't good, right? Cortland Sutton scored a touchdown, but was pretty negligible in terms of being able to stretch the field. So do we hope the Broncos get better? Sure, and for just the sake of the NFL and for the overall product of what we're consuming, yes, you want the Broncos to play better. But personally, I hope the Broncos don't necessarily get better. I'm not a Denver Bronco fan. I'm not a Sean Payton fan. I liked Russ with the Legion of Boom, but I do think that his whole, celebrity status has really gotten to his head. So you have that going for him. I don't know. It's one of those. I was glad that the Raiders pulled out the victory. And quite frankly, I don't like Jimmy G very much. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but I'm pulling for the Raiders this year. I want the Chargers to win that division personally, but go Raiders, right? I have a Raiders polo hanging in my closet from when I had the Vegas gig and we were doing shows at the Virgin Hotel and Casino. So getting to really interact with Raiders fans and what have you, like it is going to be an awesome year for the Raiders. And I'm here for it. Again, great for the overall product that we all love to consume. Moving forward, Philadelphia versus New England. I'm not going to touch a lot on this game just because I don't think that this game was indicative of how the season goes at all. Philadelphia looked decent. New England looked bad in the first quarter, and then Mac Jones started to get hot. I think this is a confidence thing. If Mac Jones can start cooking, I think New England, I sung the praises all offseason, and I have gotten laughed at by so many people. The New England Patriots had a defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia playing offensive coordinator last year, and that dude is a terrible OC. He's a terrible head coach. Matt Patricia is an above average defensive coordinator, and that is it. Then bringing Billy O'Brien back from Alabama, slotting him at OC where he used to be under Bill Belichick. New England's offense can win some games. That was my big takeaway from this is they took Philadelphia to the very end of this game. Philadelphia coming off of the Super Bowl run. The Patriots took Philadelphia to the end of this game with significantly less impact players. Mac Jones had a great game, albeit throwing 54 times, which is unsustainable. That defense looks phenomenal, which it does every year. Bill Belichick is a wizard. The Patriots play Miami in week 2, so we're going to get to really see what the New England defense can do. As powerful as the Philadelphia Eagles offense is, with the amount of skill players that they have, nobody has the skill players of Miami. So if New England can take them to the brink, I'll buy the New England Patriots as being a fringe contender and having the ability to really turn this around. They did lose to the Eagles, but only by 5 points. It was 25-20. However, the Eagles did sustain some injuries, right? Kenneth Gainwell, their leading back, got hurt. They saw a few players on their defense go down. So it's going to be interesting to see what Philadelphia is able to do, because Philadelphia, if the Patriots are fake, if they're fakers, right? Assume that the Patriots aren't actually as good as they played and they end up just getting dragged all season. What does that say for Philadelphia, right? Was it week 1? Yes. Could the Eagles have played better? Yes. We're going to see, because Philadelphia lost their OC and their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator in the offseason. And it does look like they're not necessarily, reeling isn't quite the word for it, because Nick Sirianni's still there. Nick Sirianni's a good head coach, but it's going to take a little bit of time for the Eagles to start firing on all cylinders again, apparently. I mean, you had some people show up. You had some players have some good games. Jalen Hurts he threw 33 times and only had 170 yards. But they won. Good teams find ways to win regardless of the final outcome, right? I'm going to beat that horse into the ground as well. So it's one of those things where, did the Eagles play bad? No. Did the Patriots play bad? No. Outside of the first quarter? No. So both of these teams could end up being playoff teams this year. I personally think that I've been preaching that the Patriots were going to make the postseason all offseason, and I did like what I saw from them, especially from their defense. And then Mac Jones had a great game. So this was a good game. This was one of my favorite games on my good games list, and it deserves to be there. And all of us, everybody that consumes NFL football, should be on the edge of our seats for both of these teams for at least the first half of the season for the Patriots, and for the full season for the Eagles, depending on what ends up happening with both of them. Moving on, second to last game that I'm going to cover in my recap, Miami versus the Chargers. I'm not going to hit on this very much. Tyreek 2K, right? I think that's what the Miami fans are calling him. Yeah, that's legit. Ty Hill went over 200 yards, had 2 touchdowns. If Tua doesn't break his brain again, he could win MVP. The dude was absolutely slinging the rock. Miami's run game could use a little bit of help. Jonathan Taylor. But all in all, Miami look, after week 1, Miami looks like one of what could be the best offenses of all time. Right. So that's awesome. Their defense could have played a little better, but the Los Angeles Chargers are no slouch. Justin Herbert is a dog. So the fact that Miami was able to inch out this win, regardless of what happened, it bodes well for Miami. Now, on the flip side of the coin, the Chargers did barely lose this one, but they did lose it. And they definitely could have played better throughout this game. You know, Justin Herbert wasn't necessarily the best he's ever been. It's week 1, but he's not necessarily the best that he could have been. Austin Eckler got hurt. It'll be worth watching that moving forward. He did bang up his ankle a little bit, and he is questionable for week 2. So we will kind of see what Austin Eckler is made of and what we have behind him. Joshua Kelly, however, did have a great game. You know, Austin Eckler had 16 carries for 117 and a touchdown. Joshua Kelly had 16 carries for 91 and a touchdown at the RB2 role. So even if Eckler doesn't play week 2, you're looking at almost the same output from Joshua Kelly. So it's going to boil down to what Justin Herbert and the receivers are able to do. You know, Keenan Allen's getting older. He had a pretty decent stat line. Mike Williams signed the big contract. He had an average stat line. Donald Parham wasn't as big of a part of the game as what I may have thought he would have been. So the Chargers did deserve to lose this game, probably by more points than they did, which is a testament to the Chargers defense. But these are both teams that should be in the playoffs. Both of these teams should make a push. And both of these teams were good. So watching Miami come out on top 36-34 was awesome. The way that they did it was just as good, right? So at the end of the day, the Miami Dolphins outplayed the Chargers, which is great for Miami. I'm a pretty big Miami hater, man. Joey, the guy that I had on the last pod with me, He's a big Miami fan, and we go back and forth all the time. I'm just not a huge fan, but man, it's hard not to be. Tua looked amazing. Tyreek Hill's amazing. Jalen Waddle is amazing. So it's just one of those things where Miami's definitely a team to monitor. Because again, if Tua breaks his brain again, Miami's done. And maybe the Chargers slide a little bit this year. We could see the Raiders end up taking second place in that division to the Chiefs. We could see the Raiders end up getting first if the Chiefs don't figure out their wide receiver issues. So this was a cool game. I do believe that this game is going to have ramifications later on in the season because both of these divisions are going to be tightly contested. Miami's division a little less so, and we'll talk about that next. But these were two high-profile offenses, two high-profile teams. Miami ended up getting the dub. Well done to them week 1. I'm really looking forward to what they do against New England in week 2. Going into our final game of this slate, we have the Buffalo Bills versus the New York Jets. The Bills lost 16-22 in overtime to Xavier Gibson's punt return there at the very end of the game, which was remarkable. However, just like every other sports show on earth is broadcasting, Aaron Rodgers did rupture his Achilles 4 plays into the game. So the Jets offense is going to look vastly different than what we were all expecting it to look like going into the season. So there's, I don't know, it's like a hazy cloud over the head of the game, right? Because at least myself and everybody that I know, we were excited to see Aaron Rodgers enjoy football again. We were excited to see what he could do with the Jets offense. The Jets defense played lights out, just like they should have. The Jets have an amazing defense. Robert Saleh knows how to run a defense. Robert Saleh is proving that he's a good head coach. And Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. Zach Wilson comes in. Zach Wilson made a couple of really, really nice throws coming in for Rodgers. And Zach Wilson's going to be the guy moving forward. Colin Kaepernick's team reached out to the Jets. The Jets are like, nah. So I like that. I like that they're sticking with Zach Wilson. And I like that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be able to get into Zach Wilson's ear for at least the back half of the season and really help develop him, help bring him along so that the Jets stand a chance. Up until week 1 of the regular season, I thought the Jets were going to be the Miami Dolphins' biggest threat for the AFC East, and it still kind of looks that way. I do, despite Zach Wilson being at the helm, I do like them more than the Patriots right now. Despite the Patriots' play against the Eagles, I really like the Jets. I think their defense is fantastic. I think they have more weapons on offense, and they did come away with the win. Good teams find a way to win regardless of the outcome, right? 22-16, they won on a special teams play. Who cares, right? A dub is a dub. And it was a good game. The Jets played with heart. After Aaron Rodgers got hurt, it felt like that just sucked all of what the Jets had going for them out of them. And they were able to rally, and they were able to get the dub against the Bills. The Bills are a team that everybody thinks is going to be fantastic. And if you remember from my AFC East show, the Bills, I don't believe, will make the playoffs. And you know what? Josh Allen looked awful against the Jets. It looked like he just couldn't get anything going. Stephon Diggs is amazing. Gabe Davis looked good. They should probably run the ball more. Honestly, James Cook looked pretty solid in the opportunities that he got. He just didn't get very many opportunities. So I don't know. Josh Allen threw a couple picks, and it just, I don't know. Ever since Brian Daboll left the Bills, Josh Allen's play has slumped, and it looks like he is continuing this downward spiral since Daboll leaving. So if you ask me, I don't think the Bills are going to be the best team in that division. It looks like it's going to be Miami, and then it's going to be a toss-up for second and third. Do I think the Bills will end up in the cellar? No. They have a lot of firepower. However, I don't think that the Bills are that good, and the Bills did not look that good in this game. So it's going to be interesting seeing what they do moving forward, because the Bills did not look motivated against the Jets despite hurting their Hall of Fame quarterback. The Bills should have ran away with this game, and they couldn't. They just couldn't. They couldn't put enough together to do it, and that says a couple of things, right? One, the Jets are no slouch. And as a caveat to that, Breece Hall coming back week 1 when I didn't think he was going to play for the first couple of weeks, dog. Breece Hall is so good at football. Like, just so good at football. And that's another ego that I'm going to stroke quite a bit. I can't wait to see him play some more because Breece Hall is so good at football. And Dalvin Cook looked good in the Jets uniform. Like, he was doing pretty solid. Like, are their receivers going to have the game that we wanted them to when Aaron Rodgers was expected to be at the helm? No, we've all seen Zach Wilson play, but that doesn't mean Zach Wilson hasn't improved. He's been sitting behind Aaron Rodgers all camp. So he's getting a level of a level of training that he hasn't prior, because Aaron Rodgers is one of the best to do it in my generation. So it's one of those things where Zach Wilson should be better than he has in the past. So are the Jets still a contender? Possibly. Are they better than the Dolphins right now? No. But the Jets could be competitive. If Zach Wilson can put together some solid gameplay, the Jets can still be a threat. And I believe by the end of the season, regardless of Zach Wilson being at quarterback, I do think the Jets will probably end up being better than the Bills. Right? And that's the recap. That's the full recap. This show ran a lot longer than I expected it to, just on terms of recap. But I am going to run into second week projections. And just as a little side note to all my listeners, you know, a lot of y'all heard me on the Picks Are In show that I co-hosted in Vegas. And week one, I didn't post any of my picks. I didn't think that I wanted to do a gambling portion of this show, just because I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to do a general sports show where I covered other things that isn't gambling. However, I did write my picks out. I did follow them for week one. And quite frankly, I had a lot of fun doing it. I didn't do very well week one because there was a lot of funky things that went on. However, I am going to be dropping a gambling show every Saturday prior to NFL Sunday. It's going to be short. It's not going to be edited. It's going to be pinged over straight from Podbean. There won't be any music or anything like that. But I do plan on posting my picks. I'll probably hit Moneyline, although I do not gamble Moneyline at all. I only bet covers. But I'm probably going to hit Moneyline. I'm going to cover the covers, and I'm going to cover the over and under. Probably every Saturday for NFL Sunday, just for shiggles. And, you know, I did get a lot of positive feedback when I was working under the gambling podcast. And then I've had a lot of people ask me for my picks already this year, whether it be in the preseason or week one. So I am going to be dropping a gambling show every Saturday for you heathens who actually gamble. So for all of you sinners that like to bet the Lord's money, I will have an extra show for you that should only be about, you know, up to 10 minutes long as I cover the picks. I don't plan on giving much background information. It is strictly going to be reading off a sheet of paper, letting you know what I expect to happen, because I do have the main show where I cover all of this other mumbo jumbo. So with that being said, we're going to jump forward into week two projections, kind of what I think is going to happen. We just covered all 16 games from week one and what happened with them, right? So this back half, as much as I want to expand on my projections and give thoughtful responses and analysis to what I believe is going to happen, this show is running incredibly long. Thursday Night Football is about to start, and I would like to watch the game so that I have something to talk about it. So we're going to kind of run through week two projections. So without any further ado, here we go. Week two, we have the Vikings at the Eagles today. Again, I'm not going to hit on this until post-cap too much. I do believe that the Eagles are going to end up coming away with it. We have the Ravens at the Bengals. We have the return of Joey Burrow after a terrible week one outing. I think that the Ravens are going to capitalize. I think the Ravens are going to end up winning it. I think the Ravens have a better defense, and I like the way that Zay Flowers really came on week one. I like that they were able to work in OBJ, and I really like the vibe that we're getting out of this Ravens offense. Even though Lamar Jackson didn't play at an MVP level week one, the Texans defense is sneaky good. And I think that's really going to be a big talking point later in the season, is I think Houston's defense is going to end up being a lot better than people think it is. And that's what contained Lamar Jackson so well. So I do like the Texans defense more than the Bengals defense. So I'm going to edge the Ravens over the Bengals in this one. I could the Bengals come out and win this? Yes. Joe Burrow could return to form. Joe Burrow could throw for 7 touchdowns, right? The Ravens have a couple of injuries on defense in the secondary that could potentially hurt them a little bit. And quite frankly, the Bengals have what could be the best wide receiver core in the league outside of the Dolphins, and they have more firepower than the Dolphins, right? The Dolphins may have Jalen Waddle and Ty Hill, but the Bengals have Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. So it's just a lot to contain. Not to mention you have Joe Mixon at running back and Joe Burrow at quarterback. The offensive line's a little suspect. The offensive line has been suspect since Burrow got drafted. So it'll be a good game. I do like this matchup. It's a division game. It's always a good game. I like the Ravens in this one. That could come back to bite me, but I do like the Ravens in this one. We have the Seahawks at the Lions. I already touched on this one a little bit. I like that the Seahawks are getting to play the team that just beat the Chiefs in their second game after dropping getting thumped by the Rams a little bit, and basically the whole team coming out and saying that they just didn't want that dub as much in week one. I think that the Lions may return a little bit to earth, to reality. I don't know if their defense can sustain playing at as high of a level as they did against Kansas City, because again, I can't emphasize this enough. Despite Kadarius Toney's drops in week one against the Lions defense was freaking everywhere. Jack Campbell played pretty solid at middle linebacker. You had CJ GJ playing well in the secondary, amongst other people, right? Like these are just big names that sell tickets. But like the Lions defense overall played well. I don't care how you try to spin it. So going up against the Seahawks with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I think that this is going to be a better test to see what the Lions are going to be capable of as we progress through the season. In terms of my projection, I really don't know who's going to win this game. I want to say Seattle because I watched the NFL last year just like the rest of y'all did, and Seattle was really, really good with Geno under center. However, I'm going to ride the hot hand, and I'm going to take Lions. I like the Lions. I like what we saw out of them in Kansas City. And I don't know, a bounce-back game for the Seattle Seahawks. I like the Lions. I want the Lions to do well this year, and this is more of an emotional pick rather than anything else. But I like the Lions over the Seahawks in terms of sheer willpower, right? You have the Texans playing the Colts on Sunday at noon. Texans all the way, baby, right? I like what we saw from the Texans. I don't think the Colts can beat Houston. I'm really thinking that we sweep the Colts this year, and that's not a knock on the Colts, although it is. I just think that the Texans are better than what their score was in week one. Again, the defense looks really, really good. There's a lot of optimism around them. There's more positivity in that locker room than there has been in a long, long time. So if our offensive line can get better, which, another week under their belt, another week practicing together, they can only get better, right? They couldn't get much worse. That's just how it goes. So I like the Texans over the Colts in week 2. You have the Bears and the Buccaneers, which this is going to be an unpopular opinion. But again, just like I said previously, I think the Bears are going to be really good this season. I would like to see Justin Fields play better. I do think the Bears beat the Buccaneers. I know the Buccaneers front seven is really good, but the Bears have so much talent. They may have squandered it in the week one. It was also against Green Bay, who historically just beats the piss out of Chicago. So I like Chicago versus Tampa Bay. I like Fields more than Baker, and I like the Bears' offensive weapons. Not more than the Buccaneers, because Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and the boys are really, really good. But I like what the Bears have built on offense, and I really do think that once this machine starts moving, the Bears are going to be much better than they were week one. You have the Chiefs versus the Jaguars, and I think the Jaguars win this game. The Chiefs starting 0-2 is a wild idea to me, especially after the last couple of years. The Jaguars are really freaking good at football. And the Chiefs looked really, really bad in week one. Chris Jones is coming back, and Travis Kelce hasn't been ruled out yet. So if you see Travis Kelce return to form, right, the Jaguars could not win this game. If Travis Kelce does not play at all, I am taking the Jaguars to beat the Chiefs. I just think that they're missing too much on offense. It does not matter if Chris Jones comes back, right? I just think that without Travis Kelce, that Chiefs offense isn't what it is supposed to be. It is not the juggernaut that we all know and love, or hate, depending on where you live and who you are and who you cheer for. But if Travis Kelce is not back week 2, I do think the Chiefs go 0-2 for the first time in quite a while. And again, that's a wild stat line to me, but this is going to be a crazy year, especially after week 1. Next up, you have the Packers and the Falcons. So this should be a bad game, right? This one should go into my bad game slot. The Packers should just beat the mess out of the Falcons. I know the Falcons played a good game week 1, but they played Carolina. Carolina's going to suck this year. So the Packers playing the Falcons, they're going to have to do a whole lot more than throw to their tight end and their running back. I think the Packers run away with this game just like they did against the game with Chicago. I just think that the Jordan Love connection with Chris Watson and Romeo Doubs, I think that's going to be too good for the Falcons to really stop. Not to mention A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are much better than anybody that Carolina rolled out. Do I like Miles Sanders? Yes. Do I like Chuba Hubbard? Yes. Are either of them as good as Aaron Jones? No. A.J. Dillon is a plug at the end. A.J. Dillon is a plug-in at the goal line. I do like him. Is he as good as I thought he was going to be coming out of Boston College? No. But A.J. Dillon is a good secondary back to Aaron Jones being a top 5 running back in the NFL. I think that with that much firepower and the way that the Packers defense is playing, especially against Desmond Ridder, second-year quarterback, whom didn't have to throw much in the season opener, I just think that the Falcons need another year or two under their belt before they can be serious contenders, and that the Packers are, honestly, if Jordan Love plays like he did week 1, the Packers are built to win now, which is ridiculous considering how much trouble Aaron Rodgers had last year. I just think the influx of youth with Jordan Love and this renewed vigor to win games, I think the Packers are riding a high right now, and the Falcons are not going to be able to take that away. Next game, you have Raiders and Bills. This is going to be a good game. This is going to show what the Bills are capable of. You know, I didn't like the Bills' output against the Jets in week 1. Aaron Rodgers got hurt. The Bills couldn't seal the deal. The Raiders looked really good week 1. So it'll be a testament to what really both teams can do, because if the Bills win this game, you can question whether or not the Raiders can sustain how well they played in week 1, right? Like, we may not see them return to that form for a while. Whereas on the flip side, if the Raiders win this game, the Bills are in panic mode. And they have to really figure out where to go with this, because if the Bills suck this year, Stephon Diggs is going to want out. There goes your best receiver. Gabe Davis is not a wide receiver 1. No matter how talented he may be, he is just not a wide receiver 1. So if the Bills drop to 0-2 on the season, there are going to be a lot of questions, and there are going to be a lot of hotly contested wild takes on every sports show that you listen to or view. And it's for good reason, because the Bills shouldn't be as bad as they looked in week 1. And if they drop the second game of the season, it's going to be a very wild ride for the Bills. Flip side of that, if the Raiders go 2-0, that's going to make for an interesting controversy in their division. So this is a very, very early hinge game for both of these teams, and it's going to be a treat week 2. Next game, we have the Chargers and the Titans. The Chargers should run away with this game. Again, this should be another game on my bad game list for next week. The Chargers looked great in week 1. They lost by 2 to a high-profile offense. The Titans also lost, but they didn't lose to a team that was a high-profile team, right? Like, the Titans could have won. They just didn't play well at all game. So, do I think Ryan Tannehill can outduel Justin Herbert? No. Do I think that the Chargers defense is better than the Titans defense? Yes. Do I think the Chargers offense is better than the Titans offense? Yes. I would look for, if you own DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy, start him this week, right? Like, I can definitely vouch for that, because they're going to be throwing up a dream against the Chargers. So it's one of those things where maybe we see the Titans fall into the doghouse this week, right? Like, this may really cement that maybe Mike Vrabel finds himself on the hot seat. You know, maybe they look to trade Derrick Henry as they look to rebuild. Ryan Tannehill's coming up on the end of his tenure. Are we looking at potentially the last season of Ryan Tannehill, whereas Will Levi will come in and take over? Are we seeing the end of Rabes? Are we seeing the end of Kevin Byard on defense? Like, where are we really standing with the Titans? I think this is going to be the first of many games that really come to show us what to expect from not only the rest of this season, but kind of the future of the franchise, right? Because Tennessee does not look good. They've been very... average is the wrong way to put it, but they win games in a very average way. They're a very average team. They just happen to have won previously. So I think that it's finally their lack of explosiveness, their lack of overwhelming firepower may be finally creeping up on them, and that we'll see, right? It's going to be a telltale sign of what's to come if they beat the Chargers, but also if they get beat by 30 by the Chargers. Next game up, we have the 49ers and the Rams. I'm going to cover it on my gambling show, but I'm going to hammer 49ers here. The LA Rams may have wanted it more against Seattle, but the 49ers are a totally different animal. I don't care if this is a division game. There's no reason for the 49ers to not win this game by 20 points. I just don't think that the Rams have what it takes on offense to be better than the 49ers defense. And on the flip side of it, I think Brock Purdy is going to play much better than what the Rams defense can contain. Is Aaron Donald and the Rams defense going to be harder for the 49ers to beat than the Steelers were? Yes. But it doesn't take much. Brock Purdy doesn't have to throw the ball 50 times for 400 yards to win a game. This 49ers defense is electric. They have a run game in Christian McCaffrey, whom I don't think the Rams are necessarily going to be able to contain. And I think, one, Brandon Ayuk went off in week 1. I love Brandon Ayuk as a wide receiver too, and I think Brandon Ayuk might have just a crazy season this year. And then if Brandon Ayuk gets covered, Deebo Samuel's right there. So I really like the 49ers in this matchup. I think the 49ers are going to have a great game. Do I think the Rams will be competitive? Probably, but I think week 1 may have been a fluke for the Rams, and this is really going to show us whether that is a good beat or not. Next game on the lineup, Giants and the Cardinals. This is going to be a terrible game. There's no way you can spin this. I don't care if the weather's beautiful. This is going to be an awful game. Again, I like Josh Dobbs, but Josh Dobbs is not necessarily a starting quarterback in the NFL, and the Giants are awful. That Swiss cheese offensive line. The Cardinals may win this game. Imagine a Kyler Murray-less Cardinals after they fire sailed their entire, all the good players on their team. The Cardinals could come in and embarrass the Giants. And if that happens, it is time to panic for the New York Giants, and you may see something like a Saquon Barkley trade for an offensive lineman or something to that effect, because they're going to have to do something to protect Daniel Jones. It doesn't matter how good your quarterback is if he doesn't have time to throw the ball, right? So do I think that the Cardinals will beat the Giants? Probably not. I do think that maybe they will have settled down, and maybe the 40-0 thumping by the Cowboys was a fluke, but this is going to be a sloppy game, I think. And it'll be fun to watch, right? There's going to be points scored or not. So it's either going to be a great offensive or a great defensive game, but this is going to be one of the worst games of the week. You have the Jets playing the Cowboys. This is going to be a weird game just because Zach Wilson's under center. Do I think that the Cowboys defense can come out and play like they did against the Giants? No. Do I think that the Cowboys defense is good enough to beat the Jets? Yes. After week 1, you have to be on the side of the Cowboys, right? They played lights out. You literally couldn't have asked for any better from them. They were perfect. Outside of Dak's passing ability, which is the asterisk here, the Cowboys played fantastic. Their offense is not going to have as easy of a game against the Jets as they did the Giants, and I think that the Vegas is going to win a lot of money on this game, not the public, right? Because I think the Jets defense is going to be able to stifle that Cowboys offense a little bit, especially with as inconsistent as Dak looked week 1 against a Giants defense that just wasn't very good, right? So it's going to hit if Zach Wilson plays well. It's going to be a competitive game. If Zach Wilson plays really bad, the Cowboys are going to walk away with another victory that, if Aaron Rodgers were playing, it might be a different outcome. It was a weird week 1, man. It was a very weird week 1, and this is one of the harder games to peg just because this is going to be the first week that Zach Wilson's practicing with the ones. So he could come in and play lights out. He could come in and revert back to what he used to be a couple years ago, last year, whichever, and just be average at best. So it's going to hinge. If Zach Wilson plays well, I think the Jets could win this game, and I would love that because, again, I hate the Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys, right? So I want the Jets to win. If I were a gambling man, I probably wouldn't touch this game, and if I did touch this game, I would definitely have to not play money line, which I don't anyways, but the money line's going to be a hard one to peg here. I do like the Jets offense. If it's moving and grooving, against the Dallas defense. I think Trayvon Diggs is good in his own right. I do think he's overrated. I think that he's got famous out of being a little out of place and making interceptions, right? Which, good for him. And he's done better in coverage as of late. At the back half of last season, he turned it up and he was getting beat less. But we're talking about a star corner that gets fried by other wide receivers on what has been almost a weekly basis throughout his career in Dallas. So if the Jets offense, if Garrett Wilson can get going, if Zach Wilson can get a deep ball cooking, I really think that the Jets can give the Cowboys a better run for their money than the Giants did, and they could potentially come away with a dub here. Next game, Commanders and Broncos. Broncos will probably win this one after their showing. We'll look to see. Russ Wilson played good in week 1. The Commanders' defense is very good. So this will probably end up being a bottom tier, a mid-tier game on next week's list, next week's recap. But I don't know. The Commanders have some injuries. Terry McLaurin didn't necessarily get going the way he should have in week 1. Sam Howell is figuring the NFL out. So the Broncos should win this game, right? Regardless of the fact that they lost what is essentially their entire receiving core to injuries already. The Broncos probably should win this one. Will they? I am probably going to bet the Commanders. So we'll see whenever I actually go over the numbers on Saturday, because even I don't know how I'm going to line out my bets. But I don't know if the Commanders should probably go 1-1 after week 2. Will they? Maybe not. But it's really gonna come down to the defenses on this one. This was probably gonna be another sloppy game. So we'll see, right? We will see. I think that the Commanders are gonna end up being better than what they showed in week 1 throughout the season, as they should, because the season progresses and everybody plays together a lot longer, and you get the real time experience under their belts. So again, we'll see. But my hopes aren't high for this game. I do think this is going to be another one of the worst games of the week. So moving on, the Dolphins and Patriots, like I touched on before. Honestly, the Patriots should get blown out here. And by all offseason projections, the Patriots should get blown out here. But the Patriots also should have gotten blown out by Philadelphia. So I think that this is going to be a good game. It's a division game. Again, Bill Belichick's a wizard. That dude knows more about football than anybody else on the face of this earth. So what makes the Patriots so good is that Bill Belichick is able to put people exactly where they need to be in the exact scheme they need to be in and run the plays that gets the most out of every player on the field at any one point. Right? So do I think the Patriots defense can stop the Dolphins? No, I don't. Do I think the Patriots might be able to force a couple of takeaways that maybe people wouldn't expect? Yes. Do I think that the Patriots are going to be able to put a lot of pressure on Tua? Yes. Do I think that the Dolphins offense is good enough to skirt past Matt Judon and the New England Patriots defense? They should, but I think that Patriots secondary is slept on. I don't think that people give them the credit that they should for how good that they're actually going to end up being. So I don't think this ends up being a blowout like what most people might expect. This is one of my games of the week, to be honest. And that's, I could be wrong, right? Like the Dolphins could come out and just smack the Patriots. And if they do, good on them. And if they do that, they're going to win the division. Assuming Tua doesn't break his brain, the Dolphins win the division if they blow this game open. But I would not be so sure that the Dolphins are just going to dog walk the Patriots. Because again, despite seeing the fall of Nick Saban right now in college football, and Bill Belichick's time has got to be coming at some point, Bill Belichick is still the GOAT of the NFL coaching circle. In my opinion, there's been plenty of greats in the past, but Bill Belichick has been able to do things that other people can't. It's not just talking about the rings. His ability to put people in the place or in the position that they need to be in, to be able to eke every single ounce of potential out of every player on the team, is a very Bill Belichickian thing. It's something that he has made a career out of. So again, I don't think that Tyreek Hill is going to get stopped, right? He's not going to have 2 catches for 13 yards, but I do think that this ends up being one of the better games of the week, and it's going to really show us what the AFC is going to be cooking with, because if the Patriots win this game, where do the Dolphins go, right? Like, they looked amazing week 1, but if they lose to the Patriots, that's a division game. That's going to have playoff implications later on in the year. Like, where do you go from that? And then if the Patriots lose this game, where do the Patriots go? Because they don't have those high-key names on offense. And if they lose this game, there's going to be people, one, calling for Bill's head, but two, at some point you have to invest in your skill players. And that was something that Tom Brady had an issue with back in the day, is that it felt like Bill didn't invest in his skill players on offense, and he just expects his quarterback to be able to win with nothing but a defense. And without Tyquan Thornton on the field, which he almost never has been since joining the Patriots, he has been injured a lot. They don't have, there's not that really, really explosive player on their offense. And that's not to take away from Kendrick Bourne or Juju Smith-Schuster or Hunter Henry or any of those guys that contributed in week 1. I just think that, maybe this might put a spotlight on the fact that Bill Belichick does not invest very highly in his skill players. But enough of that. Moving forward. Last 2 games of week 2, we'll touch on these. Saints and Panthers. Saints should win this game. I like the Saints in week 1. They didn't score a lot of points, but I did like what the Saints did in week 1. And the Panthers are going to have a lot of growing pains this year. Again, incredibly young and experienced wide receiver core. Miles Sanders is a better change of pace back than he is a lead bell cow back. Chuba Hubbard, albeit a really good change of pace back, probably should have been the lead back. There's going to be a lot of moving parts to the Panthers offense. And do I think that this is the week that they really put together a really good performance? No. Back half of the season, once Bryce Young settles in and the early season jitters are gone, could the Panthers be decent? Yes. Could they win games? Yes. Are they going to win this division matchup against the Saints in week 2 after the Saints are coming off a dub and the Panthers lost with a pretty piss poor offensive outing? Probably not. I think that the Saints more than likely are going to be the team that really put something together this week. And that we could see, Derek Carr is still gelling in with this offense. He's still new, and it's only up from here. Derek Carr was good in Vegas. He didn't necessarily get the shake he should have. So the Saints really are, I'm expecting the Saints to have a good game on Monday. I like what the Saints are doing. I like that the team that they've been able to build. I like what they've done with their offensive line. They've got a lot of their new names to the NFL in their offense in terms of younger players, but Chris Olave was a high-profile pick last year, and he already looks good this year after a really solid rookie year. Rashid Shaheed looks amazing again in his second year, I believe, with the Saints. Their defense looked really good in week 1 against a bad offense, but their defense looked really good, and they're playing another not very good offense in week 2. So I would expect the Saints to probably take the week 2 matchup with the Panthers. Anything can happen any given Sunday. I like the Saints here, and I would look for this to be a pretty decent game, but the Panthers probably make a couple of mistakes. Derek Carr probably throws a pick. This will be another sloppy game, but the Saints by 14. Just kidding. But the Saints should walk away with this game. No game in the NFL is an easy game unless it's the Cowboys playing the Giants week 1 in the rain, but this might be an easy game for the Saints. And last game on the slate, I am a closet Browns fan. If you know me personally, you know that I'm a closet Browns fan. I love an underdog, and I hate Kenny Pickett. So I like the Browns versus the Steelers. The Browns had a much better week 1 game than the Steelers did. The Steelers did play a better team, but the Steelers also looked like one of the worst teams in the league week 1. The Steelers have a ton of offensive line problems. The Cleveland Browns have Myles Garrett. So it's not a good matchup for the Steelers in week 2, especially coming on the heels of the just piss poor outing that they had on offense, defense, and special teams in week 1. So I like what the Browns are doing. I like the team that they've put together. If you know me personally, you've heard me really, really, really complain about the Deshaun Watson contract. I feel like it's going to be an Achilles heel at some point. Do I think that Watson was worth the money that they gave him? No. Do I think that Watson's the best quarterback that the Browns have had in years? Yes, absolutely. And the Browns' skill players are very good. I loved Elijah Moore with the Jets. I think Elijah Moore is going to end up being a big part of this offense. I love Amari Cooper. I think if Dallas wouldn't have traded Amari Cooper, Dallas would have already won another Super Bowl. So I like Amari Cooper in this offense, and I think if they can really get their passing attack moving, that the Browns are going to just beat the piss out of the Steelers. They have the best running back in the NFL in Nick Chubb, and if they can really get their passing game cooking like they should be able to, the Browns should be able to beat the Steelers. With that being said, this is a divisional game. Is Mike Tomlin going to allow his team to get dog walked by the lowly Brownies? Not at all. I think that the Steelers play a little better. The only asterisk that you can put next to that is, just like I said in my preseason breakdown of the Steelers, Kenny Pickett is a wild card for this team at this point. He stares down one side of the field, which was blatantly evident in week one when he wasn't getting pummeled by a defender. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers are able to do with Deontay Johnson out. And really, if the Steelers can get a run game going with Najee and Anthony McFarland, they might stand a chance to be competitive. But I really like the Browns in week 2, coming off of what we saw in week 1. I think the Browns the Browns showed more. Could it be a motivation or a morale thing? Sure. But the Steelers were the kings of the preseason. They won the preseason. Everybody expected Kenny Pickett to come out and look like a stud, especially people in the trading card community, which if you know me, you know that I have a personal card collection. I do collect football cards at the Coach's Quarters PC on Instagram. So the card community thinks Kenny Pickett is just the next big thing. And, quite frankly, it's a bad take, because he's proven nothing. And he has looked bad. He looked average at best at times last season. And, this preseason, he was doing things that is indicative of a poor quarterback in the preseason. It just so happened that he was the QB1 going up against second and third stringers. So he was playing better than what he actually is. So this will be a good game. I am taking the Browns to beat the Steelers in week 2. I could eat my words, and cheers to everybody who wishes against my picks. But I do like the Browns here. I think that they showed more heart. I do think that they're probably going to end up pulling through, and this could be a really good season for the Browns in a very, very stacked division. So that's my week 2 projection. So we have week 1 recap. We have week 2 projections. Moving forward, I do believe that I'm going to be dropping shows on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So it is going to be 2 shows. You're not going to have a mega long show like what this one ended up being. This was just more of a lack of time type deal. Work's been brutal, so it's just been hard to film as much. But moving forward, shout out to my amazing editor, Chris, who has put together a template for my show. So editing is going so much faster, and the editing is getting better as we go, which, not a knock on him, because it was pretty great week 1 or show 1. So it's, we're only going to get better from here. So yeah, look for my show drops to come on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And again, I am going to be dropping a gambling pod every Saturday under the exact same banner. It's just going to be pinged straight from Podbean as opposed to sent out to my editor first. You're not getting any of the magic of the music or any of that fun stuff. It's going to be a more straightforward and serious my takes on what the gambling side of this is going to look like every week. And I'll hit on Mondays, but I'm going to leave Thursdays alone. I don't like Thursday night football. It's not my favorite to gamble on. I mean, naturally, I've hit on it before, and I'm not bad at it. I don't like Thursday night football. So I'm not going to mess with that. I'm going to give y'all my Sunday takes, and I'll give y'all my Monday takes. And if you like it, great. If you don't listen to it. Again, it's just an ode to the podcast that I was on previously with the Mr. Picks. Which shout out to Mr. Picks for really sticking by me when we were on the PixarN and, getting me more invested into the podcasting game. But yeah, it's just going to be a slight return to form for what really brought me to the podcasting platform to begin with as a host. So with that being said, we are going to shut this show down. I'm so sorry that it ran so long. We are trying to, extend the shows a little bit, but not necessarily to this point. And this show will end up being 2 shows every week moving forward. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. My fans are the greatest on the planet. Y'all are the reason that I do what I do. And you're honestly, without y'all, there is no me, right? If I didn't have an audience, I wouldn't have a show. So thank you all. My fans are the greatest. With love, Mr. Showtime out, baby.